So here's an album that came out a few months ago I only just discovered. Disciples' 2019 album, Love Letter Killshot. I'm not sure how this one slipped past me. I'm usually really good at keeping up with bands I like and new releases. But this one slipped through the cracks. One of the first things I noticed about this album is how different it is. I've heard some say that this album is their heaviest album in a long time. I'm not sure if I agree with that. Although I will admit I thought that at first. There are a lot of change-ups in these songs, so a lot of songs will change tempo and pacing a lot, which is kind of interesting actually, even though they do tend to follow the same verse-chorus format. I've seen comments where some people have said that this is a return to their roots or something along those lines. I would disagree with that. I feel like this album is still very much in the style that Disciple has been releasing albums for in the last at least 10 to 15 years, ever since the self-titled album. There are little changes here and there, but I don't hear anything on this album that makes me think of the first four albums. If you're familiar with this band already, then you already know what their song structures are like. Very simple tracks, catchy choruses, verse, chorus. You might get a bridge or you might get a solo, and that's about it. There aren't very many surprises on here. All the songs pretty much are in the 3 to 4.5 minute range. And that's something I've always wanted more from this band, but I also accept it. After 12 albums, this being their 12th, you can't really expect a band to change after all that time. They found a formula, they're going to stick with it. I would like them to, but I've also got to be realistic, and if the band has not shown any signs of varying their song structures at this point, they're not going to. I also noticed doing my trusty Wikipedia search that the lead guitarist had left the band at this point. I don't know if he played on this album or not, but it's kind of disconcerting seeing another member leave the band. I liked that the last two albums seemed like they mostly had a consistent lineup. And I guess if he played on this album, then that might make 3 straight. And the drummer and rhythm guitarist are still there from the last couple albums. I also noticed that this album seemed to have a lot more guitar solos than a lot of their previous albums. Now, the band has done guitar solos in the past, but this is the first album I really noticed a lot of them on there, comparatively speaking. There are a few moments of experimentation musically. Mostly it seems like they kind of went into some of the pop direction with a couple of tracks, with some of the electronics that they use, but I'll get into that when I get into the songs. But for the most part, this just seems like another typical Disciple album. And I might be seeming a bit hypocritical, accepting Disciple for the music they put out and being overly critical of another band for releasing an album that's ultra simple. But I don't feel like Disciple sacrificed their verses just to make a song that's built around the chorus. Making a verse that only has, like, say, 2 lines and then you go directly back to the chorus. I'm not saying they haven't done that, but I don't remember a song where they've done that. And as I said before, Disciple is not a band that does anything different for the most part. They've got a song structure that works for them, they're pretty much going to go with that. Whereas other bands that I might be more critical of for releasing simple albums have shown that they have the ability to do more diverse things and put out a few epics, songs in the range of 6.5 to 8 minutes long, and have them mostly work. So a lot of my judgment on a band is based on my expectations of them. I don't expect this band to do epics, so I can accept that the band is putting out an album that I expect them to put out. I've also noticed this album continues the trend of having guest vocalists. I'm not sure why they consistently do this. To me, a guest vocalist should be offering something that the main singer of the band can't do. Say if they were to bring in a Rob Halford equivalent, somebody who could sing really high-pitched and really offer something different to a song. Or if they brought in, say, a metalcore, melodic death metal singer to do some growling. Not that I really want that, but that's not something that he does, so that would be offering up something different. Or maybe somebody who had more of an operatic singing style. Just something different, and it seems like they're just bringing in other singers who don't really offer anything more than this singer already offers. Maybe a slightly lower voice, but that's about it. And for all I know, these might be the singer's buddies, and he's just wanting them to be on the album just because it'll be a good time for them. And if that's the case, I can certainly understand that, but I'm not really a big fan of guest vocalists on albums anyways. Just give me the singer and I'm fine. But I've rambled on for long enough, so let's go ahead and get into these tracks. The album opens with the song Cuff the Criminal. And honestly, I think this was a poor choice for an opening track. I think this is something that might have served the album better being more like track 3. This song is definitely different for the band. There are a lot of electronics in this song, some electronic beats, some synthesizers. There's a guest vocalist who I personally don't really care for, not that the person sounds bad or anything, just like I just already mentioned, I'm not really a big fan of guest vocalists unless they're really going to bring something new to the table. And while this guy has a lower voice than Kevin Young does, I feel like Kevin could clearly do this stuff on his own, and the song wouldn't really change all that much for it. I do give the song credit for being different, but I feel like the different elements they added were more the electronics and the change in vocal melodies, which is kind of cool, except it feels like they're more going in a modern pop direction, at least what I think of as modern pop, whenever bands use this kind of style, because I've heard this style added in to rock bands' music before when they get a little more pop oriented. This makes me think a little bit of that really crappy Bullet for My Valentine album that came out a couple of years ago. It's not the worst song in the world, even with the guest vocalist and the electronics, it's still not great. The song does pick up an energy when the drums and some guitars kick in, although the guitars are off in the background. But the chorus is just Cuff the Criminal repeated over and over again, not even with a melody to it. And for me, I'm not feeling this track. I don't care for it. It's not the worst thing in the world. I wouldn't demand somebody turn it off if they're listening to it, but it's definitely not a song that I enjoy. The song also does the trope of adding in a lot of vocals going, whoa, over and over again. It's not super offensive. I've definitely heard this done a lot worse, but it is still there, and it is an aspect of modern music that I don't care for. But with the last song being more pop oriented, hearing the electronic intro to the next song, Reanimate, I was starting to get a little worried. I was thinking to myself, oh god, are we in for another one of those horrible albums like that Bullet album I mentioned earlier? But no, this song kicks in, it becomes a typical Disciple heavier rock track. A lot of energy, a super catchy chorus. I absolutely love the chorus to this song. The verses have good energy. The second verse actually slows down a little bit after the start of it, and there's some different effects thrown in there too. So they do actually change things up a little in that second verse, which is kind of nice. I do feel like this song runs into that problem that I have mentioned before of making verses extremely short, a bit too short. So at times you feel like all you have left is the chorus. I still feel like they have enough presence where this song doesn't completely fall off, but I feel like we are heading into that territory of modern song structures that I don't like. After the second chorus, there is a bridge where the song completely changes. It gets a lot quieter. There's some quiet guitars being played, and you've got the singer singing a little bit. The only aspect of this part of the song I don't care for is the backing vocals during it. Again, it feels like they're heading into more of what I think of as post-2000s pop. It just feels a little bit cringy, but it's not too bad. I've heard this style done a lot worse. So it doesn't ruin the song. This is also the first song on the album to feature a guitar solo. It's short, there's not a whole lot to it, but at least there is one there for a little bit before they go back into the chorus and then the song. I have a few issues with this track, but I do really like it a lot. Wake Up is next, and I really like this song, but I feel like it could have been a lot better than it turned out. The song is mostly a hard rock song with varying tempo changes, which is nice. It starts off with some fast-paced music before the first verse kicks in, and the song slows down a little bit. The song picks up speed as it builds towards the chorus, which is also a little bit slower. The first verse I don't mind at all, actually. This song definitely has more of a been there, done that Disciple song feel to it, but it's still nice to hear and I still enjoy it. The chorus isn't bad, but it feels like it's missing something. I really like how he sings the line, "For the love of God, can you hear me screaming?" I think that melody is done really well, and even the first Wake Up leading up to that I think is fine. I feel like everything that follows it is just kind of there and doesn't really fill out the chorus as well as it could have. Still not bad, but I feel like they could have done a little bit more. The second verse actually seems a little bit different. Part of it is just played with electronics and vocals, and even when the guitars and drums kick back in, I feel like that verse is actually different from the first verse, which is nice to see. We also get a solo which is a little bit longer and definitely a better solo than the previous track. I actually like this solo a little bit. So ultimately this still ends up being a pretty solid track. I just think it could have been one of the greats with a little bit of tweaking, especially with the chorus. Next we have the song Panic Room, which feels very schizophrenic. There are moments I quite enjoy in this track, and there are other moments that I don't really care for. This song has a guest vocalist who, again, I feel like serves no purpose. And the song also gets a little bit experimental with pop sounds. At least what I consider pop sounds. I'm not at all familiar with modern pop, but some of the stuff they use in this, like I've talked about before, is what I think of when it comes to modern pop music. The first verse starts with some synthesizers and what sounds like somebody snapping their fingers, which is a little bit too cringy for me, I'm not going to lie. But if that was the only instance of this, I wouldn't really be too bothered. And then we get a short section of the verse where the drums and guitars kick in, and then the song gets to where it's going a little bit. And the song starts to move a little bit, and then it slows down right away after that with a build towards the chorus, where the song then gets heavier for the chorus. And that's where the guest vocalist kicks in and screams a little bit before the singer comes in and sings the rest of that. This is all stuff Kevin Young could have done himself. Again, if it's fun for him to have one of his buddies along just to record the track with, no issues with that whatsoever, but it's not something that really works for me. I'm not really digging the guest vocalists that they've had for the past few albums. We also get some electronic effects on some vocals in between the first chorus and second verse. The quiet part of the second verse is different from the quiet part in the first verse, so I do like that change, but otherwise follows the same formula. The song does a complete 180 during the solo, where the song speeds up and gets really fast for a while, and then slows down and does a bunch of different changes, which is interesting, and the solo itself is not bad. And then the third verse, the quiet part is just piano playing and singing before going into the rest of the song. And I like that change. That's definitely my favorite quiet part of the song. Although I understand why they didn't do that in the first two verses, as that would have completely not fit the mood that they were going for. There are some nice grooves in this track. There are some good moments. I'm not sure I'm really sold on this one though. It's kind of a weird track for me because there are parts I like and parts I don't. Play to Win is more of a heavier but mid-tempo song with a bit of a groove to it. The chorus definitely has that been there, done that Disciple feel to it, but at the same time it's the second best chorus we've had on the album so far. I do like the melodies during the verse, as I feel like Kevin is trying something a little bit different, and the solo has a feeling of the album Southern Hospitality to me, which is kind of interesting. Otherwise, there's not really a whole lot special about this track. I think it's a solid song, but there's just not really a whole lot special about it. Fire Away is the first ballad on the album. and it's a little bit different from a typical Disciple ballad, which I appreciate. I really like the verses a lot. Most verses in a Disciple ballad you would think would either be no guitars at all, acoustic guitars, or clean electric guitars. This song, they actually use heavier guitars, they're just toned down a lot, so you still got electric guitars with distortion on them, but they're just toned down a lot and kind of more in the background. Nothing that hasn't been done by bands in the past, but it's a nice change for a Disciple ballad, and I really like the verses a lot. The vocals definitely feel like Kevin is going for more of a meaningful tone here as they're going for that ballad style. Where the song kind of falls for me is the chorus, which kind of drags on a little bit and doesn't really go anywhere for me. I'm not really feeling the melodies for this one. The solo is also pretty unimpressive, as it was in the previous track. At least it's there, but it's still not really anything special. The song itself has some nice ideas. As I mentioned, I really like the verses a lot, but I don't really care for this one that much. Misery is probably my second favorite song on the album. It's got a really catchy chorus and a really nice pacing to it. This one is probably still a little bit softer. I definitely would not call this a heavier track, but it's definitely not a ballad. It's definitely higher energy. The chorus is definitely the heavier part of the song. I like that both the first and second verses are a little bit different from one another, and the solo is the best one we've had in a couple of tracks, so that's nice. I really like the effects on the guitar during the intro. The only negative I really have to say about this song is the effects that are used on the vocals during the chorus I don't really care for, but it's not enough to make me not like the song. I think this one is really good. And I feel like he's going for a bit of a message here about people who like to play the victim when they really aren't, or they're just unwilling to see the positives in anything, and I can certainly appreciate a perspective like that in this day and age. I think there are definitely people who have legit gripes, but I feel like there are probably quite a few people that just like to play the victim. So if that's what he's going for with the lyrics of the song, then that makes me appreciate it just that much more. Overall, still a very good song. Chemical Wisdom is another schizophrenic track. There's a lot of change-ups in this song as well. I'm not quite sure how well they work, but this song is growing on me. The verses mix between a typical, more groovy style Disciple track with a section where there's another guest vocalist. When that guy kicks in, the entire music changes and it feels like they spliced in a piece of another song in there. I'm not really sure how I feel about that change in the verse, as the main part of the verse is way too short. The chorus is really nice, and I don't even mind the build up to the chorus, but it's just that one part of that song that keeps me from really loving this track. The chorus is really good, it's really catchy. There's a softer section that plays after the chorus that kind of fills it out, and that part's growing on me a lot. The solo is a bit too short, but I was actually surprised there was a solo in this track. It felt like one where there would not be one. But it only lasts about maybe 10 seconds or so it's way too short. This song is another enigma for me. It's definitely got some strong points, and it's also got some points I'm still not sure about. Never Too Late, in no way, shape, or form, is a perfect song, but it is my favorite song on the album. And if I do a favorite songs of 2019 list, this song would definitely be on that list. Probably towards the bottom of the top 10 list, but it would still make that cut. Part of that being I've had a lot less time with this song than other songs that would be on that list. And part of it because there's not really a whole lot musically impressive about this track. It's not bad by any means, hence it is my favorite song on this album, but still there's not really a whole lot impressive going on here. The song again has quite a few change-ups. It's mostly a heavier track. The verses are mostly faster paced, with a slower section that builds up to an up-tempo chorus. The chorus has a really nice melody to it. The solo itself doesn't really do a whole lot for me. It's a little bit short, and I'm just not really feeling a connection with it. It's not awful or anything, but it doesn't really do much. I'm glad it's there. What really gets me with this song is the message behind it, and I think the singer is going for more of a it's never too late to come to Jesus sort of vibe. That's what I get from it, but I kind of take that to be It's never too late to come to God. It's never too late to turn your life around. It's never too late to stop abusing whatever substance you might be abusing. Just, it's never too late to become a better person, whether that means finding God or not. Like I said, I'm pretty sure they mean finding God, but for me, I can take that and kind of say, and that can mean find God, or it can mean other stuff, depending on how you look at it. But at the end of the day, the message I get for this song is that it's basically saying it's never too late to be a better person. And I really like that message. I don't know that I agree with it. I think there are circumstances where, yeah, you done fucked up. It's too late. Like, somebody molests a child. Yeah, no, you're done in my eyes. But I still like the message nonetheless. I think it's a really solid one. It's very positive. And in this world, we get so much negativity. It's really nice to hear something like this come out of a band. Touch of Pain is the second ballad on the album, and this song also incorporates a lot of those pop electronic beats. I swear I hear somebody snapping their fingers again during part of this, but maybe that's just me. Honestly, this is the weakest song we've had to this point. It's not the worst thing in the world, it's not unlistenable, but this one honestly does nothing for me. I'm not going to lie, I was also doing other stuff while listening to it and got distracted immediately after the song. So I did not give it its full attention, but the style just doesn't really work for me. I'm sure I've mentioned on their two previous albums that I'm not really a big fan of Disciple ballads. They have a few that I like a lot. Mercy, No End at All, Whatever Reason being my 3 favorite. I'm not sure if Into Black would count as a ballad. I don't think it really would. If it did, I would count that one too. But overall, I'm not really a Disciple ballad fan. I appreciate that they do them just because it does offer something different for an album. But for me, they don't really connect too well besides the ones I mentioned. Walk With Me is an enjoyable track. I think of this song as comfort food, if you will. It's a pretty typical heavier Disciple song with a lot of melody to it. This is definitely not a song where they're pushing any new ground here, although there are 2 guitar solos on this track, which is pretty surprising. Both are pretty short, and Kevin sings over the second one, unfortunately. The second one is my favorite of the 2, but they're still there, which is really surprising. It's kind of a by-the-numbers Disciple track, but I still really like this one a lot. And it's really nice to hear after some of the experimental songs we've had on this album. The album ends with the song Best Thing Ever, and if there's one thing that irritates me, it's waste of potential. This song definitely feels like another ballad. There are some aspects that seem a little bit heavier and a little bit different from a typical Disciple ballad, but there's a lot going on here that just feels like a ballad to me. There are some heavier sections, there are some softer sections. I really like the build to the chorus. I think the verses themselves are pretty decent. My main issue with this song, besides there not being a solo, this is only the 3rd track out of 12 that doesn't have a solo, so that's actually pretty good. But my main issue with this song is the chorus. Kevin simply repeats the phrase, "You are the best thing that's ever happened to me," over and over again. And that gets really repetitive. When I got to the second chorus, after hearing the first line, I paused the song and took less than 3 seconds to come up with a better melody to follow that up. I didn't come up with lyrics for it, mind you, just a melody that would have followed it up and made the chorus a lot better, so I know they can do better than this. I don't hate this song by any means. It's not even my least favorite song on the album. That would be the previous ballad, which was a couple tracks back, and I've already forgotten the name. It's something about pain. I forget the name of it. But it's still not a track I really care for all that much, especially since I feel like there's a lot of wasted potential. This, with a better chorus, could have been one of those ballads that I like by this band, but instead, it's just wasted potential. I would say this is definitely Disciple's most experimental album. I really appreciate how they do it, even though I feel like they're experimenting with what I think of as more modern pop elements, stuff I've heard done by other bands when they try to be more accessible, which is kind of funny considering this band's structure is already set up to be pretty damn accessible anyways. But I like that they mixed those experimental songs with more typical Disciple songs. So they were able to experiment a little bit and yet not alienate people who listen to the band for their typical sound. I really think that's how bands should do it. They went ahead and did a few tracks where they did that experimentation and then still gave the fans of the old style something. And I really appreciate that. I think, to repeat myself, that's the way to do something experimental if you're a band. This album is better than the sum of its parts. There are several tracks I like on here, but there are several songs where there are only aspects of the song that I like. Pretty much every song on here has something that I really like about it, with only one, maybe two exceptions. And I don't outright hate any of the tracks on here. But this is still a really tough album for me to rate. Do I like it? Do I not like it? After describing the album, I still don't really know, if that makes any sense. I find it to be an enjoyable listen as a whole, but as standout tracks go, I really like Reanimate, Never Too Late, Misery are my three favorite songs. Wake Up is good. Walk With Me is good. Play to Win I also like, and there are a couple others that are decent enough, but I guess what I'm trying to get at is some of these songs I don't necessarily like on their own. I'm thinking of like Panic Room or something along those lines, but as part of the album, I'm okay with them, if that makes any sense. And that's what I was trying to get at with I feel like this album is greater than the sum of its parts. This is a tough one for me to rate. All I'm going to say is that I appreciate the album. That's really the best way I can describe it, is I appreciate this album. And there are definitely strong songs on here.